Hello YouTube, it's Accurate again, back with a new video from the home studio. So today I want to try to answer some of the questions that you guys have sent me about the MPC One.
Accurate Beats.
Now, first of all, I get a lot of questions about the audio recording functionality on the MPC One and whether or not you can sample from your turntable straight into the MPC. And this is not really a straight answer, but in this case, what you can find on the MPC One are line level inputs right here. So you can plug in a synthesizer or a drum machine or something like that and it's gonna sound fine. But taking a look at the inputs of the MPC Live instead, you can find the same inputs right here, that's line level, but you also have these two RCA jacks right here, which is your phono level input. And there's also a switch between line and phono inputs. So when it comes down to it, it actually depends on your turntable and whether it outputs a line or a phono output. Take someone like me, for instance. I'm using my Technics 1210 turntable, which outputs a phono signal. So that signal needs to be amplified somehow by a preamp, an amplifier, or a DJ mixer, or something like that. Or I can choose to just plug that straight into my MPC Live and it's gonna work and sound as it's supposed to sound. And a turntable like that also needs to be grounded somehow, so that's why you have this knob here. You can put your ground cable in and just screw it in. So that's the phono level input of the MPC Live. So here you have both options. But if I try to plug my turntable into the MPC One instead on the line level input, the audio is going to be lower and muffled and just not sound the way it's supposed to sound at all. So in order to be able to plug a turntable straight into the MPC, using this one you need to have either an amplifier, something like that, or use a turntable with line level outputs. There are a lot of turntables like that out nowadays, like the PTO1 Scratch and the Reloop Spin. All of those things outputs a line level output, so you're able to record that straight into the MPC, no issues at all. What's important to remember here though is that there is a big difference between line level and phono level inputs and outputs. And while we're on the topic of recording audio into the MPC One, let's talk quickly about the audio tracks. So I'm going into my audio tracks like that and I'm going to input config to make sure that my monitor is on and my track is armed. So now I can record anything that goes into the inputs of my MPC One. So let's give that a try. Stop and turn my monitor to auto. And there we are. So I can do this for 8 tracks of audio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then if I try to add anything else, it says that it doesn't work. The maximum number of audio tracks has been reached. This operation was not successful. But let's go into audio track 2 here and arm that one and change my sound. So let's record something else on audio track 2. And turn it to auto. Not my best piece of music, but yeah, it works. So if you want to see audio tracks, you just go here and you have all your audio tracks and all your MIDI tracks connected to different audio tracks. And well, yeah. And if I go here, I can actually see the waveform that I recorded on track 2 and track 1. So that's that. Now if I go back to MIDI and I browse for some drums, I'm now on my MIDI track 1 instead, so it's not the same track 1. So now I can record my drums on MIDI track 1 and on the same sequence as my other instruments, and it's gonna work like... seamlessly like that, even though my performance here kinda sucked. And someone here on YouTube also asked me to record 16 bars of music for 8 tracks using just the audio tracks, and it worked without any issues at all. So even though this is not how I'm planning to use my MPC One, like an audio recording unit like that, it's good to know that it actually works, even though it's limited to 8 audio tracks. So another question that I get sometimes has to do with the MIDI implementations of the MPC One and how it works to actually use this one as a sequencer for something external. So I don't do this a lot for my own workflow. Let's talk about that in a future video. But now my MIDI is connected from the MPC One into my Jupiter XM. So my first MIDI track is the drums that I have, and let's go into a new one and assign that to MIDI, and in this case MIDI 1, and that way it triggers the Jupiter XM. So let's record some MIDI notes from the MPC One triggered by the Jupiter XM. Now I can change anything on my synth. Okay, cool. So now that kind of sends the MIDI out to the Jupiter XM, which plays the sound and sends it back over the audio cable into the MPC. So if I want to lock this down and for some reason record that audio into an audio track here, I could. So obviously the MPC One is more than just a sampler. It's able to sequence external gear, and you're able to record big chunks of linear audio into it. That's good to know. So what more? Effects on the inputs. Yeah, someone asked about that and I gave him kind of a wrong answer, because you're definitely able to insert input effects on the input of the device itself. So that way you can hear your audio going into the MPC One with the effect that you want to apply on it. I think I said that I thought that wasn't possible, but now I know that it is. And I've also seen a lot of comments here on YouTube about people being disappointed of the fact that the MPC One doesn't have a battery inside of it, that it needs to be connected to wall power to function. And people have asked me if you can run it on USB power and that way use like a normal power bank to power it up, which unfortunately is not an option either. I actually spoke to a guy who works at MyVault, which is a company that makes like power banks but with different cables and stuff to make it connectable to things like the Microfreak or whatever. And way more things than you might expect are actually able to run off of the power that you get from a USB port, but that's not the case with the MPC One. But I'm expecting a shipment from OmniCharge in a few days. OmniCharge is a company who makes power banks for different things than just USB powered stuff. And I think that should work. I can't really see any reason why it wouldn't work, but yeah, that's a power solution for using the MPC One in portable mode, like portable. But more on that in another video. And another question that I've seen related to this is if you can run this one off USB power if you're using it as a controller for the MPC software. And the answer again is unfortunately no. You need to connect it to wall power in order to function in standalone or in controller mode. So that's it. There's this big difference between running the MPC One in standalone or in controller mode. Because in controller mode, you're just using the MPC One as a controller for the MPC software on the computer. And when it comes to hosting like VST plugins or instruments or heavy things, all the hard work is done by the computer in that case. And people have asked me if it's possible to install third-party plugins on the standalone version of the MPC One. And the answer is just no, that's not possible. And I don't think it's really reasonable to think that it is, because if the computer inside the MPC One was powerful enough to host something like Omnisphere or Contact or even the Waves plugins, that would be just too good to be true. You know, you need a computer to do that hard work. So right now it's not possible, but in the future, let's just hope that we see that from any of the manufacturers out there. Maybe Akai will do something like that. Maybe Native Instruments will. Who knows? Let's really hope for something cool there, but I just want to make it clear that right now it's not possible to install anything like that on the MPC One. Okay, so pads. People are asking me about the pads of the MPC One. So the drum pads on the MPC One are the same quality and the same material as the ones on the MPC Live. They are a little bit smaller, but they feel exactly the same to the touch. And just as I said in my first video on this, It took me like 10 minutes to get used to the pad size of the MPC One, so not really a big issue, but I have to say that I enjoyed the pads of my Machine MK3 controller a little bit more than both the ones on the MPC One and the MPC Live. I just like the size of these ones and the fact that they're not super fat like the ones on the MPCs. And the spacing between the pads here is just what really fits me well, but this is all very, very subjective. And someone even asked me to compare the size of the pads on the MPC One to the pads on the MPK Mini controller. And the pads on the MPK Mini controller are bigger than the ones on the MPC One, so that's it. So here's a good question from Instagram. Do I think that Akai is going to release a battery-powered standalone MPC One? And well, I don't know, but my guess is no, because that's gonna compete too much with the MPC Live. And the MPC Live, I guess it's their like standalone flagship MPC, and it's gonna be for a while. It's standalone, it's battery driven, it has all the bells and whistles. And the Akai MPC One is like the little brother of that, and the one that's aimed towards entry-level beatmakers. But you know me, I really enjoy my MPC One, and right now I think I can still say that I like the MPC One more than the MPC Live. And then there's a bunch of people who are asking me if I prefer the MPC One over my Machine MK3 controller, which is a super hard question to answer. I've used Machine since the first one came out, and I'm really heavily invested in the entire workflow of Machine. And I've become kind of fast on it, so it takes me less time to get an idea out there on Machine than it does on the MPC. But that's just me, and that's just because I'm used to working on Machine. So if someone put me on a timer and gave me 30 minutes to create a beat and made me choose one of them, I would go for Machine. Because I know the workflow, I've used it for years, and it's like second nature to me to use Machine. It's just quick and easy to me, even though I really enjoy the workflow of the MPC One as well. And it might sound strange, but the fact that Machine doesn't have touchscreens actually helps the speed of my workflow a little bit when it comes to beat making. Working with the MPC is great in all ways possible, but sometimes it just feels a little bit less intuitive, I guess, to read text on a screen and press the screen without getting the physical sensation of pressing a button. You know, that's just a little bit quicker on Machine. And I know it by heart, so I know where everything is, and I just fly through it. But if I try to erase all that history I have with Machine and just think about myself as the producer I am, maybe I would prefer MPC One actually, because it's so much easier to get into the finer details of editing things, like MIDI notes for instance. Editing recorded MIDI notes on the Machine controller is actually kind of a headache. It's possible to do, but normally I just tend to delete my entire part and record it from the get-go, which is a workflow that kind of works for me. But on the MPC One, or the MPC Live for that matter, you could zoom in to the MIDI notes on your touchscreen and just mark the MIDI notes you want to edit and adjust them or just delete them, which is easier than it is on Machine, so that's good. As a hardware unit in general, we can't overlook the fact that the MPC One is standalone. That's a big selling point for a lot of people, and I like it a lot as well, even though I tend to use it mostly here in my home studio. It's just nice to know that I don't have to rely on the computer. And that's one of the drawbacks for the Machine MK3 controller, that it's just a controller and it can't work at all in standalone mode. It's just a MIDI controller that's very well implemented in the software. Let's all just hope that Native Instruments eventually makes a version of the Machine controller that is standalone. That way a comparison like this would make much more sense. And to me right now, I really enjoy working with both the Machine MK3 and the MPC One. It just gives me, I guess, a wider perspective on how to create music, because they are kind of similar but still kind of different. So could I recommend the MPC One to a beginner producer and someone who wants to get into beatmaking? Yeah, sure I could. It's a great device for that, but the problem is that I could say the exact same thing about Machine MK3. Also good for a beginner, also a nice way to get started. But I also want to say that if you're new to this and you're thinking about getting into this as a hobby, you don't have to dive headfirst into something like the MPC One or Machine or anything like that really. start simple and start with something more affordable. Start by making some loops on an iPhone, an iPad, or any of the free softwares that are out there nowadays for Mac or PC. It's just a jungle, but you can find some really nice pieces of software that can get you started from the get-go. So hardware units like this are super fun and super inspiring, but it's not necessary to have something like this to start making beats. And that's it for this video. I tried to give the answers to some of the questions that you guys have sent me on YouTube and Instagram and whatever, and I hope you learned something. So now it's actually time for me to pack up my MPC One here in the original box and send it back to Akai. This was just a review unit, and I'm waiting for my proper one to arrive, and it should be here in like 3 weeks or something like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. So thanks a lot for watching this video. Hope to see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like and share, and go to my whatever Patreon, and I'm gonna release some t-shirts, some merchandise real soon, so check that out on the channel and Instagram and whatever. I'm so bad at this. This is just not natural. Fuck it. However, thanks a lot for watching this one. Hope to see you guys in the next one. Until then, ha det gott.
Accurate beats.